I mean, who knows where we land with tariffs, but
well, I was just going to say that. Yeah. So I think there's tariff talk and then there's tariff reality. Mm-hmm. And, we've seen some of this early on where, subcontractors and others are hedging, saying, oh, well, that air conditioner that you want to buy is up 20%. Well, why? Because of tariffs. I'm like, well, paint me the line of how, no. It could. Yeah. But I mean, some folks are taking advantage of it. But I do think that costs of construction, cost of supplies and materials is absolutely something that we're tracking on a regular basis.
Welcome to Money Market, a Bank of Tampa podcast. We highlight the businesses, expert business advice, the local economy, and points of interest in the Tampa Bay market. Follow us on YouTube, Spotify, Apple, or wherever you find your favorite podcast. And make sure you like, follow, subscribe, and share this episode with a friend or colleague. I am your host, Owen Lefebvre, for the Bank of Tampa, Tampa Bay's oldest and largest community bank. Today's guest is Mike Griffin, the co-head of the Florida region for Savills, a business advisory firm of more than 40,000 people worldwide. Didn't realize you all were that big, but very significant. More than 1,000 employees in North America and about 50 in the Tampa office. Mike is also the vice chair of the University of South Florida Board of Trustees and the chair of the Finance Committee, where Mike graduated from with a bachelor's in business administration. Mike was also named to the Florida 500, Florida Trend's 500 most influential business leaders in Florida. Mike Griffin, I feel like I'm in the presence of greatness. Welcome to Money Market.
Well, it's great to be here, Owen. Long-time listener, but longer-time friend, and just great to spend some time with you.
Yeah, no, I'm really excited to have you in. Sorry I didn't have you in sooner. I'm delighted that you're here. I do want to start on a personal note. So your USF tailgates. They're pretty legendary. But what has always, I don't know why I haven't asked you in the moment, but what time do you get out there in the morning? Because it's premier parking.
It is.
And there's a ton of people out there. So you need some good space.
It's, it started back in 2003 when I graduated from USF, and it started with my dad and I and a good friend of mine, a fraternity brother, who moved off to Seattle to work for Amazon. And it's just something I just felt like I wanted to start doing. Why not have a tailgate and bring folks around? And I remember those early years. It was, I had a little charcoal grill that I would take not only orders, but, how would you like your hamburgers? And if it was a big game, steaks and, kind of a call to, made to order kind of situation. But it's honestly just taken off. And I think a big part of that is just having people around that love being around each other and who love USF and who love this community. But, what started with three of us, we've had games in the hundreds of people, wristbands and security and bartenders and probably, maybe some liability insurance here and there.
Probably a good idea.
But, my philosophy has always been all are welcome, whether you're a student who's looking to meet some great people in the community, university president, politicians, alum, but just truly, if there was a door, it would be wide open. And but it's something that I really enjoy. But to answer your question, our friends at the Tampa Sports Authority allow the lots to open 5 hours before kickoff, which means I tend to get there at least 6 hours before they open, and there might be a beverage or two consumed waiting in line. But we're always in the same spot, and really, really love doing that. So for a noon kickoff, do the math. I'm out there by 6 a.m. at the latest, and pretty ready to go to sleep by 6 p.m.
I believe it. No, good, long day, I'm sure, but great party. And to your point, I mean, lots of USF support there. But what I do appreciate about it is you do open your arms to everybody, and there's just a lot of, not only influential business leaders in the community that don't necessarily have ties to the university, but then also, like you said, I mean, just some students and other folks that, are just you've got some sort of relationship with that there's, no business tied to. It's just everybody come out and have a good time. And
that's right.
Yeah. No. So
Bank of Tampa. Yeah, I've never allowed sponsors, but could be a great sponsor. Just keep it in mind.
I might be open to it. So you were student body president, and now you're on the board of trustees. Mm-hmm. Was that kind of a lifelong aspiration that materialized?
Look, USF it's I love it equal to the air that I breathe. I really do. And I've seen the power of how USF has changed lives. It's changed my life. I've seen it change others. I've seen how it's changed the trajectory of this community. A true anchor of what makes Tampa Bay great. For me, it was honestly, one of the first people I met at USF was your wife, who was student body president at the time. And
who I love the story, and I'll interject that you came up to her and said, I'm going to have your job one day.
Pretty much. I'll admit
she
that. She
loves that story too.
And, and just really, wanted to be involved in a meaningful way. And, USF, the best part about it is it doesn't leave you. And I think for me, going back on the board, being on that first board as a student, and then, kind of coming back to the board later in life, just felt right. And, when you look at the trajectory that we've been on, the changing of leadership that we've had there to ensure that, what makes our university great is still there in its core, but that we evolve and that we modernize to ensure that not only are we relevant for the future of the workforce and job creators and students, but we don't forget, who we are and what got us here. And I think that's really a big part of what makes USF really special.
Well, I can think of no better person for the job because you really do bleed, green and gold. But with that position comes some big responsibilities. You'd mentioned change in leadership. So searching for a new president, you're on that committee. Tell us a little bit about that process.
So I chaired the committee last go around when we hired President Law, and I felt like that has been very, very successful. So I'm fortunate to be chairing it again. So we have a great committee of community leaders, and we're in the I'd say probably the fifth inning of the ball game of where we're going to land the plane. It's an extremely important hire. President Law has done an extraordinarily great job to really elevate the university to be community minded and just has done transformative work. And she's given her life to USF. She's an alum and been a part of the university for many, many years. To now find that next leader that can take us more on a national level. Now that we're in the AAU, we had over $738 million in research and grants last year.
Incredible.
We just announced another record-breaking year in philanthropy at $184 million.
Wow.
We have an endowment north of $700 million. Great credit ratings, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. We need a leader that's a true executive, a CEO type person that can run a very large economy within a very large economy. And we're going to keep working at it until we find who that person is. But I'm very optimistic that we're going to land on a transformative leader that's up to the challenge of running and taking over a university that's on the right path.
I like the way you positioned it and stated that in the criteria, because I do feel Florida, more than any other state in the country, has had this propensity to pick politicians to run their university. And I feel like that's unique to Florida. Is that something with kind of what happened at UF kind of fading? What's
you look, we all love history, right? And if you look at American history, the number of founding fathers and early presidents that had roles at higher education institutions go back to our founding. And so, we've had politicians run the University of South Florida. We've had non-traditional people run the University of South Florida, like Rhea and Betty Castor. Look, the state of Florida is a major stakeholder. And, we are a state that continues to prioritize higher education. We're the number one ranked university system in the nation, according to U.S. News. And that's because we're able to keep, tuition low. But that amount of investment that comes from the state is very, very significant. And look, we're going to do it in a collaborative manner, with all our stakeholders, which includes our leaders in Tallahassee. And I'm not on the board at UF. I'm not on the board of these other places, so I don't know how that works. But I know what's right for USF, and I'm confident that our board is going to pick the right leader. And it might be a non-traditional person. It's just a matter of right leader, right time. And I think it's very important to have someone with executive experience that can really elevate this place. And look, we're not going to expect anything less.
Speaking of stakeholders, so the student body has been very vocal. Do you, and I guess after being student body president, do you take the students' opinion into consideration when you're making these type of decisions?
No, great question. Absolutely. Look, I rattled off a lot of stats that are very, very important, but at the end of the day, the core of our being is student success. It just so happens that this morning I was meeting with the student body vice president to hear his thoughts on behalf of the student body about what he thinks the student body desires in the next presidency. Obviously, the student body president is on the board of trustees. We listen to him and we engage with him. I want USF to be a place where all voices, have a place to be shared, and not just some. That everyone feels comfortable sharing their positions, obviously in a non-threatening and non-violent manner, and we're going to follow the law at USF.
So what does the student body want?
I think the student body wants someone that is engaging with them, that prioritizes them, that candidly, is personable, that is willing to, go to a basketball game or go to the theater or, just walk the campus, have lunch at the Marshall Center. But someone that's very engaging, and as big as the enterprise is at USF, it's all about students. And I think, our next leader will absolutely be someone that embraces that, and not just on one campus, but all three campuses, and Tampa, St. Petersburg, and Sarasota, Manatee.
So it is a business, and so how do you balance the the students' needs with the striving for academic, but you're also operating a business? You talked about the research component of it. How does the board look at balancing all those initiatives?
The evolution of higher education has been really fascinating, even in the last couple of years, where your industry, my industry, has been certainly disrupted. Over the past several years, higher ed is just kind of getting there, and to see kind of USF's opportunity in that disruption, I think, is really incredible. And I think it's because, from kind of the operating side, it's a very lean organization. We were doing Doge before Doge was, kind of brought upon us. And I think students recognize that, they want classroom, professor availability. They want good academic advisors, and the transformative, millions upon millions of dollars that have been deployed around those fundamental kind of table stakes, if you will, for students have been there. So that's why we're graduating more students, in 4 years or less. That's why their average pay is going up, and that they're getting meaningful employment post-graduation. So I think like the fundamentals are still the focus around students, but you look at the size of the USF budget. It's larger than half the countries in the world. It's significant.
Yes.
And so, it's bigger than the city of Tampa in a lot of ways. And so like government, so it's like, there's a lot of responsibility, but it's also very exciting to be able to modernize a city within a city. And I think the balancing act is to ensure that again, we're not losing focus of why we're there, but that we're giving the students more tools to be successful later in life.
Speaking of a city within the city, so the city of Tampa has Raymond James Stadium, where USF currently plays. Your other big responsibility is, building a on-campus football stadium. So first in history, so that city within the city. What's the why behind that?
It was really, really important to show the country that we were serious about athletics and that we were serious about football. We've had a lot of documented successes. I know that you've been a diehard fan like me, from the get-go. And I think we've had an incredible opportunity to, be a renter, if you will, at Raymond James, and, to be at a stadium that hosts Super Bowls and national championships and concerts has been great. But it's not the same as owning your own home and kind of getting out of your parents' house and living on your own.
Great analogies.
So it was just time. And look, Chairman Weatherford said it best. We didn't really have a plan. We just said we're going to go do it. And I think that's the beauty of USF is you can make, dreams come true if you work at it and you're bold enough to really see it through fruition. And so, it's a gathering place not just for football fans, but for the entire community. But when you also look at the stadium itself, you look at the operations center for football, which will rival any football operations center in the entire country. We have our indoor facility. We're redeveloping our golf course to a midtown type development. And then you have everything happen at Mosey. You have everything happening, with Moffitt and Avent and the VA, and of course the mall. Like it's all coming together finally, and a part of the city that could really use a lift. But the anchors are finally collaborating together, and I think it's going to be really special. And look, the stadium's a big part of that, but there's so much more happening.
What does the financing look like today? So, you're in commercial real estate. I'm in banking. We look at the ROI.
Yep.
Part of that is the financial component of it. So,
sure.
Where are we at in that process?
So, the stadium total costs are just north of $400 million. We're financing $200 million of it. With a different bank or another bank. I won't say who it is. And the other half is equity, everything from, reserves that we've had, or surpluses rather, we've had in some of our auxiliaries, certainly the philanthropic side as well. We've had some great donors that have stepped up to support the stadium. And look, we're designing in a way that will allow us to expand it over time. So we're making some good infrastructure, investments now to make it easier later. But it's going to be a world-class facility. I know that it's taken a while to get here, and there's other places that have built, stadiums that may have forgotten to put in water fountains, and they make shake a little bit when you walk on them. That won't happen
maybe
here.
One of the east a little bit.
Yeah, we're going to have water fountains, and it's not going to shake. So it's going to be really special.
I am for one really looking forward to it and dreaming of. I mean, go back 25 years ago when I was there, and playing at Raymond James was amazing. But also the ability to walk out of your apartment or dorm and go to game day and be right there on campus is going to be a game changer for it. So thank you for all your work there. You do have a day job that you do. I appreciate you entertaining my conversations about USF, but kind of pivoting. So you're the market leader at Savills, which is a global real estate powerhouse known here in the area, but I think some of the other brokerage house maybe has a little bit more name recognition. So how does Savills differentiate itself?
So 42,000 employees worldwide. We have 1,000 in North America. We're headquartered in London and publicly traded over there. And U.S. headquarters are in New York. Look, I think what differentiates us is our culture. Our true, collaborative, entrepreneurial spirit that we have, and I think that comes across, genuinely with clients and with prospects. And ultimately, we are helping occupiers of real estate, users of real estate across the country and across the world, that are trying to make the right decision, trying to maximize their real estate. And so, as you know, a lot of organizations, their top spend is HR. Number two, a lot of times, is their real estate. And so for us, it's really that nimbleness, but also having all the resources and the tools of, the 4 or 5 firms that are bigger than us in scale. And that's something that's really special to me as well, because it allows me to bring in people from all over the country, all over the world, to curate the right solution and not be driven by, kind of what silo I'm in or, geographic parameters. It's what's right for the client, what's right for the prospect, and go make it happen. And it's just a huge reason why I love working at Savills and why we've candidly been successful.
You had mentioned occupier services. So that's a big portion of your business. Probably people would most associate it with a tenant rep.
Sure.
Similar, but different. Can you kind of elaborate on the differences?
Yeah, it's, you're speaking my language. Absolutely. And I would say the biggest difference is kind of when you look at, a one-off transaction versus like a portfolio engagement. So working with someone that has multiple needs, maybe in the Southeast, across the U.S., globally, we work with a lot of clients that we really kind of lead with the consulting more than the brokerage. And so it's a lot of workplace advisory, workforce advisory, incentives, negotiations, et cetera. Then it's, oh, by the way, there's transactions that have to take place and get done. But really leading with the advisory side is, I think, also a differentiator for us. But it's really looking at the holistic picture for an organization. Now, certainly we work with clients, on a one-off basis from time to time, but I think where we really are able to show and demonstrate a lot of our value is not just on those, but when we're able to really be, working closely with, the C-suite and the organization around, how can we better, again, maximize your entire portfolio, drive efficiencies, and, making sure that those spends are as efficiently utilized as possible.
So a lot more comprehensive, a lot more consultative.
That's right.
Less transactional, although that happens sometimes.
Absolutely.
How do you think when you were approaching a lease negotiation with a landlord, given the scope of what you do in the occupier services, how does that differentiate yourself from a firm that is more transactional?
So outside the U.S. we do everything. Landlord, tenant, retail, industrial, office. We even have a residential group in the UK. But in North America, it's been predominantly focused on, again, the occupier side. And I think for us, it's that conscious decision to really look at what's right for that one side of the table. So you're right. A lot of people don't know who we are because we don't have our sign in front of a building saying for lease, because we are representing the users in the building as opposed to the landlord side.
Right.
And I do think it's a differentiator because, we're being driven by a side that doesn't have the pressures of a large, asset relationship or, other, kind of drivers that come with working with landlords. And so for us, it's that whole focus. Now, we're evolving in that thinking in industrial and healthcare, life sciences, where there's a lot more synergies to work with, the developer or landlord side. But our DNA in the U.S. absolutely has been historically focused on representing the tenant or the user.
Okay. In terms of just a story to encapsulate kind of what you do at your best, you don't have to name any names because I know that can be sensitive. But is there a good story you could share with our listening audience?
Yeah. So we're fortunate to work with 70% of the AmLaw 200, and I think 68% of the AmLaw 100. So we do a lot of law firm work, and I could spend a lot of time on that. But I think, honestly, the work that we've been doing for the state of Florida government for the past 20 years is something I'm very proud of. It started with really myself and my longtime partner and friend Ann Duncan when we were hired to work with the state of Florida in a 2-county area here under a relationship with a larger real estate provider. And by the end of that engagement, because of us outperforming our prime contractor, we ended up running with 80% of the state. And then we went after it ourselves. We were hired through a competitive process. We were ranked number one. Our firm, Vertical Integration, was ranked number one above all of the national firms. And to see that evolution through multiple competitive procurements to keep that business, but to see the team grow. We've got 6 people that are dedicated to that relationship, and to see careers take off because of that has just been really great. But, it's helping agencies, after a natural disaster, after hurricanes, mobilizing people in to help find off, catastrophe recovery spaces. But to help the state of Florida drive efficiencies, to see when we started, they were leasing over 9 million square feet. Now they're leasing closer to 6 million, so that's a 30%, reduction in private lease costs that are able to go to programs that are candidly more important than paying landlords, for the state. And so I'm just really proud of that. And it's a long-term relationship. And it's one that even though I'm a little less involved with, I'm still involved with, but just to see the team grow and to see the impact it has on the state in which we live in has been really just great to be a part of. And
that's where, when you talk about that, I mean, going from 9 million to 6 million. So that's a significant reduction in square footage, which also impacts, I would imagine, like your compensation. So
absolutely.
In a complex lease negotiation, what's something that is overlooked often?
I think one of the big things now, certainly there's the top line economics, but, providing more flexibility in a lease document, contraction rights, more flexibility on how you can sublease or assign, leases in this environment. People are having to make long-term commitments in order to make the capital spend work for new construction and new projects. But, there's like the top of the iceberg, kind of the financials, and everything below it, is honestly where the real value comes in. And it's also places where, you have more control over your operating expenses, that landlords just aren't arbitrarily passing all of that through. But I'd say flexibility and really identifying the hidden areas where landlord profit centers live, project management fees, property management fees, et cetera. Those are always negotiable.
Okay.
And a lot of times they're overlooked, and they stack up significantly for a lot of companies very, very quickly.
You mentioned flexibility within the lease. Are you finding that that's available today? And I would say, like, specifically, the Tampa Bay market. I mean, our market is, and I'd like you to talk about that a little bit, but our market is a little unique. We've held up substantially better than most of the country. So we don't have a ton of vacancy here. We do have some, but like in the prime areas, downtown, West Shore, not a whole lot of vacancy there. Are landlords willing to allow that flexibility?
So good question. So we're sitting here in the third quarter, right? Early third quarter of 2025. The first quarter of 2025 was the most significant leasing quarter in recorded history in the market. A lot of big deals were done, and it was really, really exciting. And a lot of that was going to product that was, not the flight to quality, the Midtowns and the Water Streets and Armatures, et cetera. And so what you're seeing now is, and you hit on it, premium space is pretty much gone with few exceptions. And so landlords are, I would say, digging in their heels in some of these areas. But when you start early, you have the right strategy, and you create real opportunity for leverage. There's movement on everything. I think it's a matter of, having the right approach and the right, support from the client to be able to, really challenge the landlord and be willing to walk. And we've had several situations where we've had clients, truly walk. And I think that builds credibility long term. But I think, look, vacancy is down 250 basis points year over year. Rental rates are continuing to go up. Some of that is driven by expenses, property taxes, insurance, et cetera. But honestly, when you're seeing deals going in the office sector north of $70 a square foot in Tampa, there's a lift in all product type. And so I think you're going to continue seeing that because certainly, speculative office construction will not be coming here again anytime soon. As much as I'd love it to see it happen, as you know, better than me.
There is one in St. Pete.
There is one in St. Pete. Halcyon is a great project. I saw Kathy Wood just inked the top floor there.
Yeah, exciting.
They're going to do a great job. You're absolutely right. Obviously, Midtown East has a little bit of space left.
But you're right. Pretty unique.
But it's kind of it's unique. And look, St. Pete needs it big time. Yep. More than the other submarkets for sure.
How is hybrid work impacting leasing? So there's now kind of a push to come back into the office. Right. So what are you seeing in that space?
Yeah, Jamie Dimon, the great Jamie Dimon's. I'm not going to repeat what he said.
Couple expletives, yeah.
But he said it much better than me, and much more direct. But look, I statistically, the average workers in the office, 3.3 days a week in this market, and so that justifies the need for office space. That justifies the need for dedicated workspace. And so a lot of that has candidly worked itself out. Look, Tampa and the state in general really never shut down during the pandemic. And so people continue to address it on a case-by-case basis. I think with the exception of tech, a lot of the other industries have really kind of settled into, expanding their presence and or really investing in their spaces in a way that attracts people in. And then once they're in the office, ensuring that they're not sitting on Zoom and Teams all day, but that there's truly, collaborative, in-person and meetings and, the change management that comes with that. But, look, ultimately, hybrid was kind of here, pre-pandemic. Certainly it's gotten a little more, prevalent post. But, this market really just hasn't seen it outside of those sectors. And I think it just speaks to the fact that we have a great community, we have great culture, people want to be together. But also, I think management-wise, we give folks flexibility. If someone has to pick up their child, from a doctor's appointment or take them to a doctor's appointment at 3:00 after school, you don't have to go back to the office, until 5. I think there's some empathy that comes with us, and candidly, I think the occupiers that are and the companies that are investing in their spaces, which means they're investing in their people and providing their people flexibility. They're the ones winning the war on talent, and they're the ones that are going to continue thriving here.
I also think, and you hit on it, if you're still in 3.3 days a week, you still need a place to put all of those people. So while they may not be there 2 of those days, the 3 days that they are there, you still need the same amount of space. Maybe it's configured a little differently, but you still need it. Going back to your other conversation too, just about that the urban, the water streets, downtown West Shore, how is that performing relative to suburban space, like the East Tampa office market?
Yeah, good question. So East Tampa, the Northeast markets are coming back. I think. Look at what happened at Renaissance Center with Fisher Investments and some really large. Renaissance Center is essentially full now, which is really remarkable. And I think you're going to start seeing this push into those other, tertiary, Tampa submarkets. Again, it goes back to. Are you giving your employees, a compelling reason to be in the office? And so if you're in these lower cost options, ensure that you're investing in the space, ensure that you're investing in the culture of the organization. And look, you've seen some product go offline that's been, completely demoed and, multifamily. And I think some of that needed to have happened. And
not as much as I thought. I really thought there was going to be more.
I agree. And I just don't think this market has the appetite for true repurposing of office buildings like you're seeing in New York and Atlanta and some other major markets. And I actually think that's a good thing.
Agreed.
And so I think you're going to keep maybe seeing some office buildings taken offline. But I think the worst of it is behind us. I think the bigger question is going to be from an asset by asset perspective, which ones are tied up in, these, these loans that are candidly, pretend, survive till 25 and now it's pretend to whenever, it's like, I'm in your space now, but I think the big question is going to be with these zombie assets that are out there that are cash flowing, but that are empty, that are going to come back, what's the inflection point for those and what will that have on the office market here? I don't think it's going to be as substantial based on kind of the structure that a lot of the loans have for the landlords that are here. But it's definitely, we're going to have some ripple effects by what happens in other markets for sure.
And I think we're very fortunate. We don't have the level of vacancy. I will say that, our regulators, if it's financed by, a FDIC bank, regulators have been willing to allow us to work. And thankfully, we really don't have any of those assets, but to work with the borrowers as long as they continue to make payments. I think it'd be great if we had some interest rate relief. I think it's helped some of that. But, some of the product types that are, in the CMBS market that don't have the same level of flexibility, I think are going to be a little challenged. And we'll have a correction in the market that I think it's been postponed or kicking the can.
But really understanding, before a company makes a decision about a long-term lease, really understand the debt situation for not only the asset, but for the landlord as well, their ability to fund tenant improvement allowances and maintain the building. And look, there's special servicers, and we all went through that, 08, 09, et cetera. And I think it's just really, really important to the extent that you can capture that information to understand what it means. And a lot of times leverage that, when loan maturities are coming at a certain time, might trigger the need to renegotiate a lease outside of the normal, process or time periods that one would have. And honestly, we've really, I think, differentiated ourselves to be able to create those opportunities that aren't being driven by, when your lease expires. So it's an interesting time. I love it. It's fun. I love getting into the minutia of what that means, what the inflection point is, and Monte Carlo analyses around landlord profitability on an asset. And it's just a lot of fun when you can come with real data and not just like, manufactured leverage, but like actually showing the information and say, how can you defend what you're trying to charge my client, based on your debt service, your expenses, and candidly the market. So we've been able to do some really transformative deals as a result of that, and had to sign NDAs in the process because he said if we told anyone that we would have issues. So it's just really exciting.
That is some really important insight for a tenant who's getting ready to renegotiate or negotiate a lease with the landlord. If they're not in the financial position to maintain the property, or just from a negotiation standpoint, who really has the leverage in that case that you're able to negotiate a more favorable deal. And I don't know that everybody thinks through that process. So well done, sir. Tampa, I think Tampa Bay has served as a model for some communities nationally that want to become that secondary market. And I know we're kind of clawing to be, a bigger market. What are some things that you think we've done right as a market?
I think that we've come a long way in the relationship between Tampa and St. Petersburg. Certainly,
we got both chambers together at a baseball game.
We got both chambers together at the baseball game. I heard that the St. Pete Chamber has a great chairman.
I've heard that as well. Thank you.
But I think that's what it comes down to is trust and relationships. And I think there's still that competitive spirit, but I feel like we're siblings that have all grown up and are very confident in who we are, and and we kind of like working together. And I think there's been some things that have brought us together. Like the Rays and the expansion of, the Howard Franklin and some other areas of infrastructure that we all just need to address. But look, I just think that the collaboration has come across really well outside of this market because we are stronger together as a region when we work together. But I think also alignment, not just from the chamber organizations and EDCs, but also local government and state government. I just feel like, there's a lot of emphasis in being open for business, welcoming business here, having real talent pipeline, with the USFs and the state colleges and our private, universities. I just feel like everyone is just kind of rowing together, and it shows when you're, because a big part of what I do is to help companies grow, and enter the market, and grow once they're here. And so when I'm out there talking about why we're different than, Dallas and Austin and Charlotte and others, it comes across as genuine because it's really what's happening. And I think we've come a long way in the 20 years that you and I have been involved. And I think it's because there's just a lot of mutual respect, there's a lot of trust, and but also we realize this incredible asset that we have, and candidly, we can't mess it up.
So what would you say is our differentiator when someone is contemplating, or comparing Austin, Atlanta, Charlotte, some of the markets that we're generally compared to, what would you say?
Certainly we could talk about geography and access to water and the beaches and our world-class airport. Our port, absolutely. I think, I'm not just saying this, I know we've talked a lot about USF, but I think we have a higher education system that's very dedicated to workforce development, that we can meet the demand of any occupier, any business that wants to be here. And you look at, Rapid 7, I was very involved with bringing Rapid 7 here. And, a big differentiator of why they chose Tampa was our connection to Talent Pipeline. And so I think that, things that I feel like maybe sometimes we take for granted, just honestly, they don't happen in other markets. And so, things that we can't control, hurricanes and, other kind of natural disasters, I think are, a challenge. And honestly, I think we've got work to do in permitting and kind of showing that we're truly open for business. Candidly, I think we have some challenges there that are real, and the reputation nationally is being affected by it. And so as much as we're working in the things that you and I are involved with, I'd like to see local government, improve, how we address permitting and just that design process and review to send the right message that we want outside investment. But more importantly, equally important, we want to help the people that are here, whether it's Main Street or the Wall Street of Tampa. We need to make sure that we've got a government that's working for everybody. Mm-hmm. And I think, certainly there's a bit of a pass coming out of the hurricanes and, kind of the influx that was needed around jobs, but it shouldn't take 17 weeks, plus to get a permit for second generation build outs in a downtown office building. And that's happening.
And I know both of us are having those conversations behind closed doors and meetings, but hopefully somebody will hear this and try to make some change.
It's real. Me, I just like to give it to you real, but I think those are the things that there's so much going for us, but let's be better about the things that are in our control, because there's a lot that's out of our control. But I think ultimately people are going to still keep choosing Tampa because of our quality of life, our culture, our people, our workforce, and candidly, kind of the bones around our infrastructure that are improving.
Are there any key indicators that Savills is looking at in the market, vacancy, cap rates, things that trends that has caught your attention?
Certainly, the continued change and decrease in available space is something that we continue to look at. I think that's a pretty easy one to monitor. But just, costs. Costs are continuing to go up in construction. I just had a colleague this morning share with me that he got pricing back for a interior build out for an office space that was north of $300 a square foot. And that was without furniture and so forth.
Ouch.
When you look at what you could build a building for, and so I think that some of that,
and that's not really, who knows where we land with tariffs, but
I was just going to say that. Yeah. So I think there's tariff talk and then there's tariff reality. Mm-hmm. And, we've seen some of this early on where, subcontractors and others are hedging, saying, oh, well, that air conditioner that you want to buy is up 20%. Well, why? Because of tariffs. I'm like, well, paint me the line of how. No, it could. Yeah. But some folks are taking advantage of it. But I think that's going to settle out. Again, that way better than me, Owen. But I do think that costs of construction, cost of supplies and materials is absolutely something that we're tracking on a regular basis.
Ooh, 300 a square foot. That's going to make things.
It's healthy.
Interesting. Yeah. It'll make things. Anything in the market that people are overlooking right now?
That's another great question. I think seeing what's happening around our infrastructure improvements, I won't say it's being overlooked or people are overlooking it, but I think I'm excited and encouraged by some of the projects that are going to help us get around a little better. I'm hopeful that Brightline, comes to Tampa.
Yeah, knock on wood on that one.
And that once it's here, that there's good linkages to St. Pete, to the airport, to USF. And look, I feel like, it's no secret of what got us here. I think there's an acknowledgement though of like what got us here is not going to get us there.
That's right.
And so, we've got to be challenging our thinking, and it is much more competitive out there, when we're competing with other regions. But I think also we just got to make sure we're taking care of the folks that are here, the businesses that are here. And look, I'm optimistic that that the infrastructures are going to continue to be addressed. But I think some of it doesn't get its its due successes or celebration, because roads and potholes and stormwater and all of that may not be overly exciting for a lot of people, but I think those investments are starting to pay off.
Absolutely. Mike, this has been a lot of fun. Anything else you want to share with the listeners?
No, I just really appreciate the time, and thankful for you and the Bank of Tampa, and you're a good champion for the region, and just happy to be here any way I can to help you, and just excited that you're at the helm.
Well, I'm happy to walk alongside you, and appreciate all the great work you're doing in the community and USF. So appreciate you. If people want to get in contact with you, how would you recommend, or Savills?
LinkedIn, website, Twitter, or X. I'm pretty easy to get to.
I get it wrong all the time too.
Yeah, exactly.
Mike, thanks for coming on Money Market.
Thanks, brother.
You can find the Money Market podcast and the Bank of Tampa online, as well as on YouTube, LinkedIn, X, Facebook, and on Instagram. Before you leave, make sure you hit that like, follow, or subscribe button up there in the corner, and we'll be sure to see you around in the Money Market.